Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I'm Scott Warr, and we are reaching back deep. Phil Maffetone, Dr. Phil Maffetone is joining us again. And I went back to try to figure out how many times he's been on the podcast. I didn't have a calculator, and I took my socks off, and I started counting with my hands and my toes, and I ran out of toes and fingers. He's been on our podcast that many times. And I was just as we started before we hit record, I was telling Phil that recently I've had two people, listeners, reach out and mention that they went back and listened to one of our first podcast episodes with Dr. Phil back in 2013, where he talked about the Maffetone method and heart rate training. And today we're going to talk about some new research that talks about brain health and brain stuff that's happening in the brain. But before we get to that, I thought we would just review with people that have not met Phil Maffetone or listened to any of the back episodes. If you haven't, just Google Trail Runner Nation, Dr. Phil Maffetone, and you'll get a full list of all of the episodes. It's worth going back and listening to all of them, especially the one where we didn't talk about running, we just talked about the Beatles. And that was one of my favorites. But before we get going, Don had an anecdotal story that he and I talked about on the run today about how has Dr. Phil Maffetone changed the way that he runs.
Well, I'll share that story. Welcome back, Phil. So nice to have you here. And
thanks, Don. Thanks, guys.
I have a blank sheet of paper that I'm starting with, and I know when I'm done, it'll be full of comments and scribbles and ideas that'll come up. But when I learned about the Phil Maffetone method, taking 180 and subtracting your age, I'm not trying to take the cat out of the bag, but that's what it is, had me running at a very low heart rate. And that was good, because I had a 100-mile run coming up that I really wasn't that prepared for. I had done several before that. I'd even done this one. And I knew enough to know that if I go out too hard, too fast, and I get in trouble, that's going to be it for my day. I'll never climb out of that hole. So my strategy was your strategy. I'm going to keep my heart rate low. I can run low all day, all night, whatever it takes, as long as I stay low. And if I come out of that, then I could end up in a bonk and then trying to recover for the rest of the day and just slogging to the finish line if I was lucky. So I kept my heart rate below at around 120, which, was not real fast. And I was not moving like I thought I could or should, but it allowed me to survive the full race and probably end up with a better time than if I'd went out hard and fast and walked my way in. So it was a great strategy. And I leaned on your program and your knowledge and your experiences that if it's good enough for Phil, it's good enough for me. I'm just going to do it. And it was a great experiment. And if it blew up, I didn't care. It was an experiment. I'd blame you, Dr. Phil. I would have said, it was him that this was his idea. But it worked for me. And I didn't stray from that since that day. Just heart rate monitoring is important.
Phil,
so thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about, so if someone has never heard of the MAF method or the Maffetone method, of course, we'll link that in the show notes, but give us a synopsis of what that is and why is it important? How can it change someone's running performance?
Well, it's really a way, the approach, my approach, whatever you want to call it, and I've been called many things, and people have used many names, but my approach philosophically is that we want to do things in life, and if you're a runner, that's a big part of it. If you want to do things in life, you want to do things so that you become healthier and more fit as time goes on, and it's as simple as that. And there are a lot of things, there are a lot of roadblocks, there are a lot of bad, evil things that get in the way, typically from companies selling you products and social crap, magazines and social media, and the latest
Podcasts.
trend of the day, podcasts. I mean, it's really shameful. It's shameful that people are allowed to do the things they're allowed to do, and as a result, people don't build their health and don't get more fit when they exercise and think they're eating well. They actually get less healthy and less fit. They get injured, they get fatigued, they haven't had a personal best. A runner or a triathlete hasn't had a personal best in years. Their body fat is getting higher. They're always injured. They're 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 just never happy. I mean, all you got to do is pass one of these runners on the road, and you see them, and they're miserable. I used to say I always wanted to stop and ask them if I could bring them home, and I thought, well, maybe that's not a good thing to say. But it looks like they're having a miserable day, and I kind of want to help them, but um, it's all up to them. It's all up to you. It's we each have our own goals, our own passions, and our own dedication. And those who are more dedicated and more serious will succeed much more than others. If your goal in joining a running club or starting to race or getting involved with trail running, if your goal is to be more social, um, join in on online dating site or something. Don't you know?
I have a question, Phil. Is it reasonable, or does it even make sense that I can train with a low heart rate, and then on race day expect to run a little faster on that
Sure,
day
it happens
with
all
a
the
higher
time.
heart rate and
Of
sustain
course,
it?
yes. That's the goal. In fact, that's probably still my most popular article that I wrote. I think it was in the mid '80s, and I wrote I updated it, which didn't mean anything other than that I wrote it better and shorter. Um, uh, 3 years ago, maybe. And as I'm talking, I'm trying to think of what the heck the article was called. Um, but it was
Train
basically
slow, race fast.
something like that. Yes, it's something that you look at and you say, "What?" And it got people's attention, and they would look at the article, and essentially it said just what you said, Don. We can train slow, whatever that means. We can define that, but if we train slow versus no pain, no gain, which is faster running. When you run in a group, you tend to run faster because everybody's got this competitive edge called an ego. And when you train slow, you build your aerobic system, and that aerobic system is what contributes to our health tremendously and is our endurance system. So unless we're doing 200-meter competitions on the track, we need a huge aerobic system, much more than doing speed work. That 100-mile race you ran, Don, that just like a 10K race, a marathon, mostly what we use and what is required of us to succeed in that kind of event is the aerobic system. 70, 80, 90% of the race is aerobic function. And that sprint to the end, we already have that. We don't have to train for that. That's hardwired into us. The aerobic system, we have to program that via training and via the diet. People forget this, that the diet is more important than the training, because the diet dictates where does our energy come from in order to run these miles, in order to run this race. And that's a key thing as well. So you can't train only and think, well, I could eat anything I want because I could, burn the calories when I train. And I say, calories of what? And that confuses people, and then they call me names. And sorry.
In all the athletes that
Forgot.
you've coached, what do you find in the trend? they need more help with their diet or their training regime? Do you have an opinion on that?
I never thought statistically about it, but both are, I have to work hard on both. A lot of people who I've seen in my career, I think, come to me with a primary focus. They're focused on training or they're focused on diet, um, and hardly any of them come focused on both.
Mm.
And so, and I don't have a diet. I don't have a training program to give people. I don't know what I'm going to do with somebody until I see them and evaluate, them as an individual. And then I tailor the need from a training standpoint, from a diet standpoint to, to them as an individual. Um, there are some basic rules, like eating junk food is never a good thing for anybody ever. So and then um, overtraining, of course, is never a good thing for anybody. And so we have to monitor them not only with a heart monitor, but from week to week and month to month to monitor their progression. And if they don't progress, then they're regressing.
Phil, one of the things that has really influenced me, and I think Don alluded to it, was the whole heart rate thing. One of my favorite stories, and I hope I remember it right, but I'm going to cue you and you can tell the story the way that it happened, was as you were training, I think you were coaching Dave Scott. Is that his name? The triathlete?
Mark Allen.
Mark
You're
Allen.
probably thinking of the Mark Allen story on the San
Yeah.
Diego
Yeah. Tell
University of
us
San
about
Diego
that.
track.
Yeah. Tell us about that and how you learned how important heart rate training was and how that translates to somebody that's listening to this podcast, why they should have a heart rate monitor, and how it can help them.
Well, I didn't learn from that. I actually didn't remember the story until Mark told it a bunch of years ago
Mm.
when we were both on a podcast. I kind of remembered it, but I didn't, because it was typical of what I would encounter with an athlete, and I certainly had seen that pattern many times, and people saying the same old thing. I can't train like this. But with Mark, I was in San Diego, and I was seeing a bunch of San Diego triathletes. Mark was one of them. Colleen Cannon, uh, Paul and Newbie Frazier,
And
and some others.
let me interrupt you real quick in case there's people that don't know who Mark Allen is. Back in, I'm trying to think, I think I was in maybe high school. The Ironman triathlon was being broadcast on NBC Wide World of Sports. It was such a big thing. And Mark Allen was the dominant force, right? It was him and some other guy, and maybe that was Dave Scott. They were like
Dave Scott,
competitors.
yeah,
And
yeah. In the
Mark Allen
beginning, it was
was,
Dave.
yeah, Mark was the tip of the top. So go ahead and continue so people have some
Yeah,
context of
and
who
he
Mark Allen was.
he won his final race, his sixth championship at age 37, I think. But Mark's career has been so incredibly great that those six Ironman wins are almost like a little bit down on the list when you look at
Mm.
some of the things he's done. Winning 20 international top key races in a row over a course of some years. But anyway, I had worked with a few athletes, like I was doing back then. I'd go to different cities and work with certain pros, and that was the first time I had met Mark. And I would kind of give an overview of my approach. We would do one-on-one assessment, um, a consultation type of assessment. They would have written out their diet, their training, the way it was up to then, competitive success, and so forth. And then we got to one-on-one out on the track. We'd go to a pool, we'd go to a track, we'd all go get on our bikes and I would watch them from the side, from behind, from the. I mean, it was crazy for me at
Mhm.
least. But it was a lot of fun, and so we're on the track with Mark, and I had a heart monitor, and nobody had seen a heart monitor because they hadn't come out yet. I had a cardiac unit that was used in hospitals for heart patients, and I had calculated his maximum aerobic heart rate, which meant this is the maximum heart rate you should train at to build your aerobic system. How fast that makes you go is really irrelevant. If you have a great aerobic system, you're going to run faster. If you don't, you're going to run slower. In Mark's case, he was running about a 9 minute pace, 9:15 pace, somewhere in there. And we're running around the track, and and he's looking at his watch, and he's looking at me like, "This is how fast I train." I said, "Yeah, that's where you begin." He said, I normally train 2.5 minutes faster than this every day." And I said, "Well, that's why you're feeling bad and you're not reaching your goals." And I said, it'll get better. You'll get faster as you build your aerobic system. And indeed, to make a long story short, Mark, um, over the next three, I want to say 3 years, uh, progressed to where at the same 155 heart rate, he was able to run a 5:15 pace or something like that.
Wow. Wow.
So that's astounding, but I've seen that kind of stuff. 5:15 is pretty good. I've seen 5 minute pace. I've seen people reach five, and a couple of people actually, runners, professionals. And but a lot of amateurs will start at 9, 10 minutes a mile, and they'll progress to 7 minutes or 6:30, which is really quite amazing for an age group runner. Um, and then that carries over. You bike faster, you swim faster, you live better, you're healthier, your injuries go away quickly or you never get them. You have more energy because you're burning fat. You're burning more fat for energy, so you're not accumulating body fat. You're getting rid of it. You're sleeping better. Blah blah blah. I mean, it's the whole enchilada, so to speak. If
And
it's a
and
healthy enchilada.
and and you've created the Maffetone, what is it? The heart rate, the maximum heart rate calculator, and it's a lot of times people say it's 180 minus your age, but you've added to that to get more precise in what that heart rate limit is, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the question is, how do we know what heart rate we should use to build our endurance, to develop our aerobic system and get healthy and prevent injuries and get faster on race day? And the answer is, um, in the beginning, um, I would calculate it based on my assessment of the athlete. I would
Hmm.
I would have them in my office. I would do a one-on-one consultation. Then I would do a physical exam, and then we'd go to the track. They would run with their heart rate monitor at certain heart rates based on what I thought. Let's try this level. I would watch their gait as they would go round and round the track, um, and at some point, I would say, "Well, I'm seeing the gait doing this at 152 heart rate, but at 148 the gait is really smooth and stays smooth in the exam and the. So we set it at 148, and then they train that way for 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then I reevaluate them. And if they've gotten a little faster at 148, then we know we're on the right track. If not, then I missed something. And that was in like 1980, 81, 82. So it was all me finding out the best heart rate, and there were not enough labs around at that point, exercise labs where you can go in, measure your breath, determine how much oxygen uptake and carbon dioxide output you're doing with with different heart rates and therefore how much fat and sugar you're burning, blah, blah, blah. So I was doing it the old fashioned way, just using logic. And one day, I was lecturing somewhere, and I was asked, I'm explaining what I'm saying right now, and someone said, "Well, how can we do that ourselves?" And I was really embarrassed. I hate being embarrassed, and so I went from that moment. I started thinking, how can we derive that heart rate number without all of that? And I knew there was a mathematical formula. It's all about math. It's always all about math. And so I started fiddling around with numbers and got a hold of some athletes who I had already evaluated who were successful at whatever heart rate, plugged in the numbers, finally found a formula that matched what I found in them, and it's called the 180 formula. And it was always start with 180 minus your age, and then find one of four categories that you best fit into based on your health and fitness. So it's not just four categories, it's really an unlimited number of categories, because some people are injured more, some people are have colds and flus every 3 months, some people are under more stress, people are injured. So based on your level of health and fitness, you make these modifications, you end up with a heart rate, maximum aerobic heart rate, and it's very, very effective. In fact, I published a paper on that 5 or 6 years ago, explained how I got it, explained how we evaluate an athlete and so forth. And that heart rate then becomes an assessment tool, because you can get on the track, and if 148 is the number and you're going along after a month or two and you're feeling good and you seem to be getting better, you can get on the track and measure yourself again, because you would have done that initially and gotten depressed because you have to run slow. Now you get on the track, you do it again. It's a month or two later, and you're 25 seconds a mile faster. You feel the same because it's the same heart rate. That's
I
what
think that's my favorite
efficiency
part of the
is.
story. It's the heart rate monitor is telling you the same information, but the watch is telling you something different because you're moving around that track more efficiently. So you can actually measure progress and not
Exactly.
just
Yeah.
grunt it out.
Yeah. It's not, we don't want to guess. We're too important to guess. And that's what these plans are that get thrown out, the trends, the bandwagons that people jump on. Oh, I've got to do 80 miles a week of training if I'm going to run a marathon. What does that mean? Come on, who has to do 80 miles a week? So we don't want to guess. We want to know for sure, and that's just what you said, Don. You get on the track and you figure it out. And if you're better, if you're faster, you're on the right track. If you're not, you're doing something wrong, and that something wrong is more often that your diet is not compatible with the aerobic system, the needs of the aerobic system.
Yeah, the one thing we don't want to do out there is race our ego, because that ego will take you down, and you just have to stay in your zone, be comfortable. Running doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be
It, it,
hard.
it doesn't have to be hard, and it should be a lot of fun all the time.
Yeah.
And the ego thing is a problem, and I often recommend people not train with anyone for a while, because if they're with a heart monitor on and everybody else is just going freestyle, or some of them have heart monitors, but they're using different heart rates, or more importantly, they're running different paces. You don't want to try to follow them. Even once a week, that will ruin your base building period. You'll have to start all over again.
Good stuff.
Well, let's that was a great review, and if that sounds interesting to you, I'm going to link a couple of our past episodes where Phil gets into more detail on that. But what we wanted to talk to Phil about today is the new research paper that is going to be published fairly soon. Is that right, Phil?
Anytime now, they say.
And it's about the brain. And this is probably one of Don's favorite subjects to talk about. He loves to talk about the brain and what the brain can do, what it can limit you to do, and sometimes you
What it
can,
can what
yeah,
it can allow you to do. I mean,
right.
it can allow you to do things that you didn't think possible. So you
So,
get
Sure
to,
can.
yeah.
so what is the thesis of this research paper? Give us an overview, and then tell us what findings you came up with.
Okay, I will do that, but let me quickly just say that when an athlete hears about brain health, they kind of get turned off because it's it's why is that important for me? The fact is the most important part of the body for an athlete is their brain. That's where everything happens. Our mix of fuels, our muscle contraction and relaxation, maintaining the gait, um, you know, anything you can think of that you have to do as an athlete originates in the brain. And so um, it is important for athletes too. Yes, a healthy brain. And if you just stop what you're doing and say, okay, I'm going to just focus on having a healthy brain for the next few weeks, you will become a much better athlete, guaranteed. Can I guarantee things on this show?
You
Sure.
can. Yeah. Yeah, we have a guarantee.
Okay,
Money
good.
back guarantee. You get every penny you spent listening that you paid to listen to this podcast back. I
Yes.
I have a question for you. You said a healthy brain. Explain what that is. I'm listening to that and going, boy, do I have a healthy brain or do I have a sick brain? I don't know. Help me out.
I'll tell you how you'll know, how you could know. So the paper focuses on healthy brain. It defines a healthy brain. A healthy brain
Okay.
is a fully functional brain. And how do we know if we have a healthy brain? Well, one of the things the paper does is it shocks people by saying, based on the data, that about 80% of the world has an unhealthy brain. Have 80% of the people on Earth have unhealthy brains. That's pretty shocking. And how do we know that? Well, we know it because for two reasons. One is more than that number of people are eating junk food, and without getting into a lot of the details about junk food, I'm going to just define it as refined carbohydrates, including sugar. And virtually all flour that's out there is refined carbohydrate. The fact that it says whole wheat doesn't mean it's whole wheat. That's a gimmick. The FDA allows you to have 70% refined flour in a product, and you can still call it whole grain. Really? Um, so when people consume refined carbohydrates, it directly impairs the brain. It also directly increases body fat. And if body fat rises above the normal level, the fat cells become abnormal. They produce inflammation throughout the body, and it affects the brain in a very significant way. It literally shrinks the brain.
Wow.
It's interesting that scientists use the word shrink. I've always been fascinated, and we've known this for years. But when a brain shrinks, it functions less. It's impaired. It's unhealthy. But though that shrinking is sort of what happens later. What happens earlier is body fat starts building up, and so people who have um, cognitive dysfunction later in life, as an example, um, runners too. Um, if you look at their end stage, here they are with cognitive dysfunction at age whatever. If you look what happened in their life early on, even as a child, you can predict that they're going to end up like this because That's what the data says. That's what the science says. We know that people who eat refined carbohydrates, for example, at moderate levels, even um, will regress to this later stage um dysfunction, later stage disease, really. So that that's the big picture of that paper.
It is, if we were in that category in our youth, maybe even early adulthood, where we were eating a lot of refined carbohydrates and having the effects of those of that food, is there a way to reverse it or to stall it? Is there a way to recover from that?
Great question. Very important question. Usually people say, well, I guess I'm kind of too late to change my diet. No. The wonderful thing about the brain is that it fixes itself. The body fixes itself too, but the brain is so much more resilient than the body. Our body, I mean, let's face it. I don't know about Ryan, but the three of us have been crumbling for a while. We're not as, we don't sprint as fast. My reaction time is still good, but it's not like it was when I was 26. Um, I'm a little older than that now. Um, we don't see as well, but our brain can still work really, really well despite the age. In fact, we could have the best brain of our life on the day we die. That's how resilient the
Mm.
brain is. The brain will fix itself. Give it a reason to work better, and it will work better. And getting rid of the refined carbohydrates is the first step. There's so many things that help the brain, many things. But what governments have done, and it's not just brain, but it's body. Here are the things you need to do to be healthy, and they list all these things, and they have and people read this stuff and they go, "Oh, what do I do now?" It's just overwhelming. So let's go to the hierarchy, the top most important part of the issue. What can we do? Almost everyone. What can we do to help our brain virtually right away? Like 2 meals later, I've got a better brain, and that's eliminate refined carbohydrates, including sugars, and that means you've got to overcome the trickery that companies use. You've got to read the labels. It's not that hard. You just have to be aware of uh, of what you're eating.
What's amazing to me is when you look at the wisdom of the body. There's a couple of organs, and there may be more, and you can add to it that are self healing and self repairing and regenerating, and that's the brain, which you've just told us about, but also the liver, which
Mm.
is extremely important. It's the industrial center, of our bodies producing, very important hormones, chemicals, digestive enzymes, all the things that it does. Then the body can repair that. So it's really amazing how the creator decided, hey, you know what? There are two very vital organs, and I need to have them be able to help themselves, and people can make corrections. We've got to do something with these organs. Left unattended, these
Yeah.
folks won't make it long enough. So let's
Well,
help them with these two.
yeah, you're absolutely right, and they will make it to an old age because modern medicine keeps people alive. The question is, what the heck kind of life are they going to have? And
Right.
that's really the key. I want to do what I'm doing now, and I may change, but I'm writing a lot of music, recording, performing. I'm writing these research papers. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I hate when people look at me and say, "Are you retired?" Retired in Latin refers to waiting to die. No, I'm not waiting to die. I'm really pretty damn busy. Um, but Don, you're right. The liver is such a vital organ, and it repairs itself, which is why you can donate a little piece of your liver to somebody who has to have their liver removed, and it will literally grow inside of them. And that's even more unique than the brain. The brain does make new brain cells. The brain does make new connections it's never made before. That's why we want to keep doing things that we've never done before. Um, and and well, I'm about to go off on a tangent, but I guess I'm not.
Well, I'm gonna throw something at you. I didn't know that about the liver until one of Don and my good friends, Jeff Abel, had cancer, and the surgeons went in. It was a I can't remember what kind of cancer it was, but it got in his liver, and they went in and removed 75% of his liver. And over the months, I can't remember how many months, it completely regenerated back to its normal size. They took
Yeah.
75% of it out. Um, Hey,
Yeah.
I have a question for you on the brain, and of course, this podcast is really a tool that I use only for my personal benefit. And if it helps other people, that's great. But mainly for my own personal benefit. You're talking about a lot of some things that can help us improve our brain health. And the first thing you said, reduce or eliminate refined sugars, which is prevalent in our society today. I want to know what you had for breakfast, what you're going to have for lunch and dinner today, so that I can compare and see if I'm living the standards of Dr. Phil Maffetone. So what did you have? I know that I don't know if you were the inventor of, but I know you're a proponent of the bulletproof coffee in the morning. But tell us what you had for breakfast.
Yeah, it's Phil's fat burning coffee. The bullet thing is kind of an offshoot of that. But
Okay.
the Phil's fat burning coffee I developed years ago, and it is for the brain. So
Mm.
it has healthy fats. We need healthy fats because, I've studied a lot about the brain, but until I actually dissected the brain and took it out of the skull, I mean, you can hold it in your hand. It's like a phone. It's this amazing thing. It's goopy and drippy, and it's like, oh, it's about 3 pounds, but it's mostly fat. So it floats. And And so if it's mostly fat, we need to, from our diet, put in healthy fats. And the problem with unhealthy fats is that when we consume them, it kicks out of the brain the good fats
Mm.
that we need to function. But getting back to your question, yes, I had Phil's fat burning coffee this morning and I made it. I make the full fare. There's a menu somewhere out there that, here are different. It's like you go into a coffee place and you look at a menu. I'll have that one. I have the full fare. So the full fare is a very strong, um, uh, dark roast organic coffee beans that I grind up when I make it, and I make it in a French press, and then I make in a blender. I put a whole egg, some coconut oil, some heavy cream, and some raw cacao. Everything's organic. Um, And then I put a little bit of hot coffee in there so it blends up easier. Whip it up for a few seconds, and that is my um, cappuccino like stuff that you put into the coffee. And it's the best cappuccino you've ever had. Um, so I have that, and it's a good number of calories. So it's essentially my breakfast. But later in the morning, I will have typically, like this morning, I had 3 eggs, um, lightly um, lightly cooked with some vegetables. I've already had lunch, um, and I had a beef and vegetable dish. Um, yeah, and then later in the afternoon, I'll have a salad with a bunch of different vegetables, and that'll be about it. My meals are begin with the biggest amount of food. So between my fat burning coffee, which actually does improve fat burning, um, and the 3 egg omelet, 3 egg, whatever you want to call it. That's the most amount of food. Then my lunch is sort of kind of a medium amount of food, and then by 3, 4, 5 o'clock, I eat little bits of things. I'll have a shake after that with 3 eggs, raw almonds, raw sesame seeds, turmeric, raw turmeric, fresh turmeric, sometimes ginger, sometimes some raw spinach, um, some sour cream, a real sour cream that has a culture in it. Um, so but that's what makes me feel the best.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is always, what makes you feel the best? And then people say, well, I feel the best when I eat junk food. That's called addiction. Sugar and refined. So we lump sugar and refined carbohydrates together because when you consume a piece of bread or other refined carbohydrates, it's going to turn to sugar immediately once you digest and absorb it. So having a bowl of cereal is like having 6 spoons of sugar for breakfast. It's the same thing. And that doesn't make you feel good. It makes you feel satisfied for about an hour or two. And then you
Now, I
go
think
raid the closet.
it's only fair, Scott, that you need an impartial judge, somebody that heard his description. I'm not going to ask you yours because I already know.
I'm glad you're not going to ask me what I had for breakfast and what I'm having for lunch and dinner.
I've been trying to get him to eat better from the beginning, and he keeps resisting me.
I remember that visit. I remember that live podcast that we did in Sacramento, and
Oh yes,
Yeah.
you tried to direct us then, but he's got you beat, Scott.
Oh, I will tell you. So I don't drink coffee, but I use a roasted barley substitute instead of the coffee. But I for probably 2 or 3 years I drank every morning Phil's fat burning coffee with this coffee substitute, and I don't know why I stopped. Maybe it was I was lazy. I don't know, but I it made me feel good.
yeah. It takes about 3 minutes. I mean, it's really hard to find 3 minutes in your morning, and so it's understandable.
Phil, you're making me feel bad, man.
Hey, I've heard all of it before. I've been through it. I mean,
Yeah.
I was the most sugar addicted person. I grew up as a junk food addict because I didn't know any different.
Yeah.
My parents gave me this crap, and I ate it, and I was a sickly kid. And I finally woke up one day, and it was like, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to be this way.
Mm.
I want to go back to that comment that you made earlier when we were talking about the brain. Really, I'm probably doing that so I don't have to disclose my eating habits. So quickly shifting back to an athlete saying, well, why do I need to worry about my brain? I should really just worry about getting my cardiovascular system going. I'm going to buy into the Maffetone method of 180 minus my age, the whole bit. And then I made a little list real quick of, so what does the brain controlling when we're out there? Why do we lean on that? Why is it important? Why should that athlete say, oh, talk to me about the brain? And if you think about some of the mistakes that we make out there, I go out too fast. Do I have the right pace? Do I have the motivation to finish this thing and to reach my goal? Do I have the determination maybe to get up in the morning and get out there on a cold day? What are my strategies during this race? These are all brain-driven things. They're not feet-driven. They're brain-driven.
They are. Or what about, I heard these two people talking about what they're going to do during the race. I think I'm going to do that too.
Yeah, you should already have that decided. Your brain should make that decision for you, not let their brain make their mistake become your mistake. And
well,
then
go ahead.
Self-sabotage, talking negative chatter in your own brain. You can self-sabotage yourself.
Yep.
And that's all brain-driven.
So, going back to that question that athletes have, why is the brain important for me? I've got to do all these things that you just mentioned. I've got to get my track workouts in. I got to get my miles in. I'm pondering all the different shoes I can wear, all these ridiculous things. The brain controls all so why is the brain the healthiest part of the body for an athlete? What doesn't the brain control? That's really the statement that should be made.
Mm-hmm.
And for as far back as I can remember, Tim, my friend Tim Noakes,
Mm-hmm.
I think you've had him on,
Mm-hmm. We have
maybe not.
a couple
And
times.
but Tim has always, so there's a term that was used in physiology, more so in other, not so much in the US, but in Europe and Australia, and in his case South Africa, called the central governor.
Yeah.
And he had this central governor idea, and people just hated that term. They didn't know what it meant, and so as a result they thought he was nuts. And but the central governor is what they used to call the brain. You want to call it the central governor, call it anything you want, call it the mind. Everything, all of us, our brains are us. This is us right here, this little 3-pound glob of dripping fat that I pulled out of somebody's skull. And the brain can outlive the body, and I was a little concerned about that. Um, but you really get a cosmic sense of reality holding this brain.
Mm.
Um, so it's not surprising that my research progress over the years has evolved to not end. I'm not finished, but has ended up with this healthy brain thing. And today, the data is more easily accessible, where we can you basically connect the dots. So if this is happening and that's happening, oh, therefore 80% of the world has an unhealthy brain.
Phil, we talked about the number one thing that can influence having a healthy brain, which is what you eat. What are some other things that we can do? I was always, and maybe you can correct me, I was always under the impression that the brain was a muscle, which means that it can be exercised. You're telling me it's a dripping foam piece of fat.
Goopy, yeah, goopy is the
What
word.
what is there a way that we can what else can we do? Do we need to do the Wordle every morning, or do we need to do, arithmetic? We need to exercise our brain. Do we need to listen to more music to exercise the brain? Help
All
me
of
out
those
here.
things.
Yeah.
Yes, all of those things. We need to venture out into the world and give our brain a reason to live, rather than sit on a couch and watch the news all day, which is what
Mm.
retired people do. So when we talked about the Beatles, when we talked about music, we talked about the two kinds, generally speaking, the two kinds of music that help the brain. One is the music we love, the oldies, because the brain can go back in time. The brain time travels. We can go back in time, and oh, that was my favorite song at 17, and I had a crush on this chick, and like, wow, it's all coming back now. That's a healthy thing. Or um, so the oldies are great, but the other kind of music that's great is the new music, because the brain loves surprises. It loves those aha moments. And when you listen to something you've never heard before and like it, you're making connections in the brain between neurons you've never made in your life. What a deal that is. And that's true with passions. If you have a passion for I don't know, making lawnmowers, or learning Japanese, which is a lot easier than English. Um, that will make those connections you've never made. And it's not just those connections in that part of the brain that benefits, but in order to make those connections and relate to this thing you're passionate about, you're bringing blood into the brain, and it's going throughout the brain, so it's helping everything.
You said the brain likes surprises, and it made me think stand up comedy. what makes something funny is the unexpected. Oh,
Yes.
he said that. I didn't think he was going to, and we all laugh. And as a community, we laugh. We're a room full of people all experiencing the same thing, all laughing together. I mean, that's a wonderful moment, and why stand-up comedy is so popular. But I think
It sure is.
yes, the brain likes surprises.
And I think you know this. Maybe you don't. If you don't, then I
We
guess we're
know.
going to do another podcast.
Oh, we know. We did a podcast on your stand-up career.
Oh, you did? Okay. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I got to check with my. Hey, did we did really? It's a little mouse that comes in. Thank you. Yeah, and it's interesting that people who so when you first hear a comedy thing, if somebody's starting to tell a joke or a story that's going to, you start hearing it, those messages go into the brain, goes from one area of the brain to another and another, and it's analyzed along the way, and then eventually gets to another part of the brain, and you get it. Then that information goes to the motor cortex. Your diaphragm does this, and you laugh. You know, if that process gets blocked along the way, you have a person who doesn't understand comedy or doesn't get comedy, or they get it, but they can't laugh. And we see that in brain injuries. It's a very, unfortunately, it's a very common problem. And those people don't usually go to comedy clubs, but we see them. I see them all the time, because since I've been doing comedy, since I've been doing music, that's where the comedy came from. Because I would introduce my songs, and I would inadvertently, I would improv something, and it would be really funny, and it makes people listen to to your song. But I've been doing more of that in everyday life. No, I try not to see anybody ever, but I do encounter people, and when I do, I'm a lot funnier than I used to be, because I'm less inhibited, I guess. But I noticed that a good number of people just they miss the obvious funniness, and it's due to a brain injury, and that brain injury could be a condition, Parkinson's, schizophrenia. Those people will not laugh at comedy. I see you're
maybe
not
the old
laughing,
saying,
you guys.
it went over
three
their
of you.
head.
God, that's like, oh, Ryan got it.
His brain works better than ours.
I think so.
Hey, Phil, one of the fun things that we love to talk to you about, and as I alluded to earlier, we did an entire podcast where we meant to talk about fitness and health, and we ended up talking about music and the Beatles for an hour, which was thoroughly enjoyable. But again, back to the brain-like surprises. I'm going to ask this question for you, and then I'm going to ask it to Ryan, because he loved, and Don too, I guess. You all love music. I want to know, Phil, what music surprises you the most, or what was something that has surprised you recently that you've really liked, something unknown and surprised you, a band or a song?
Yeah. So one thing that happened to me when I became a songwriter, which was 20 years ago, 20 years ago today. No, it's 22 years ago. I don't know. I always loved music, and I listened to the Beatles, thousands of times each. I mean, literally, I was obsessed, among the bands and the singer-songwriters. When I became a songwriter, it forced my brain to function differently, to function better. My hearing, my discernment for sound improved dramatically. And so now when I sit down and put on headphones and meditation is incredible for the brain. Using music to meditate works really well. But one of the things the first time I noticed it was with a Beatles song I heard thousands of times, called Maxwell's Silver Hammer, a Paul McCartney song. And they got to like the third verse, and there was a bubbly organ. And I thought, oh, I never heard that organ before. This must be a different mix or a different take. and I looked and I saw, no, this is the Abbey Road album. Um, and I realized that I was hearing things better. And despite hearing that song thousands of times, I never heard the organ. And that has happened with everything. I listened to um, the rock opera Tommy by The Who
Mm-hmm.
recently, the whole thing in one meditative sitting. And man, it's like, holy crap, did somebody really do this? This was like, what an ingenious piece of creativity. But I heard things that I never heard before, as much as I've, listened to that album many, many times. So I'm always listening to new things in hopes of being excited. Um, um, and I'm trying to think of something new. Um, Lisa Hannigan is the one that keeps coming up. Lisa um, used to play with Damien Rice, um, and they split up. Lisa went off and did her own thing and just excelled as a singer songwriter. Um, the singer songwriters are not well known, the newer ones. So you mentioned Lisa Hannigan, nobody knows who she is. You mentioned Damien Rice, nobody knows who most people. Um, but they're singer songwriters, and we have to go back to the late 50s, early 60s when the singer songwriters were hired in the Brill Building in New York City to write songs for bands and commercials. Um, and One day they started saying, hey, we could sing these songs just as good, if not better, because we can get the emotion out better than some sterile, studio recording. And they could. So Neil Diamond, Paul Simon, Carole King, they all came out of the woodwork and started doing their own stuff. And it's uniquely different than the industry music, which is the garbage music that is out there, where songs are written by committee, which is a problem. So any singer songwriter is a chance for you to be surprised.
What about you, Ryan? What is surprising you in your musical journey?
Um, I really enjoy listening to things I've never heard before. I love the novelty of it. I love being surprised, like Phil was saying, that we seek. So I enjoy a plethora of different like genres and stuff. I enjoy hearing uh like people taking something static, so just a normal guitar string. If you just play it, if you don't bend it, no vibrato or anything, it's just static. But then being able to bend it and give it that human touch. So like I don't know, like David Gilmour, he can make the guitar sing and you feel the humanity in it. It really interests me when people take digital uh sounds like that and are able to bend a sine wave or whatever and give it that humanity that wasn't there before. I mean, taking you know, maybe more distorted sounds and giving it a rhythmic voice. That interests me a lot. Uh, but recently, I've been getting more into just singer songwriter stuff like Elliott Smith and Nick Drake, and like hearing their very simple, melancholic uh, melodies, and that's been interesting to me. Just the guitar, basically, and uh, hearing their
Yeah,
voices. I
if you wanna lesson in guitar playing and songwriting, listen to Nick Drake, um, a guy from the '60s into the early '70s who didn't make it. I wrote about him in my book, B Sharp, which is about music and the brain. Um, and then he was discovered 20 years later or whenever. Um, and all of a sudden, he is today one of the most favorite singer songwriters of all the professional musicians I know
Mm-hmm.
because of his uniqueness. It's just amazing. Um, and one thing you said, Ryan, reminds me of when I got engulfed in the music industry. I moved to LA when I woke up. Soon after I woke up and was a singer, moved to LA and kind of got entrenched in the music world, much like people see me as being entrenched in the sports world. Um, and I would follow a singer songwriter who writes a song, and I'd follow that all the way through when they start rehearsing it as a band, all the way through to when they record it, and all the way through when they go on tour and play it. Um, and it's just it's just amazing. And one of the things I learned from Rick Rubin, who I worked with, um, who learned from George Martin, who was the Beatles producer, is that first of all, you can only write a song once. Anything that sounds like that doesn't work. But more importantly, if you're the singer songwriter, he wants to hear, I want to hear the raw song, the emotion. I want to hear the only way to do that is to play it on your guitar, just you and the song, or maybe the piano, without the band. It's not the, and if it's really good and emotional at that point, then it can really become a great song. But if it's not good, adding more instruments is not going to make it any better.
Interesting. Don, do you have any exciting music that has gotten your brain charged?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I think jazz. I've been listening to jazz and just realizing it's not a bunch of instruments that are all competing to get on the stage, that they're actually calling one another back and they're playing something, someone responds to it. There's a lot going on in jazz that I didn't even realize until I started slowing it down in my brain and listening to what's going on here.
Yeah, and jazz is unique because it's really there's so much improv going on, improvisation. So they're not reading notes. They don't have parts. There's no structure, depending on the kind of jazz. But um, improv is such a vital thing for the brain, and it's such an important thing that helps the brain. We're improving right now. I don't know what you guys were going to talk about before I got on. We've done, as you know, the craziest things. We've gone all different directions, and I hate when people say, "I'm going to send you a list of questions." No, I don't want any questions. That never works. But improv in music is when you just play. And people say, well, what do I play? I don't know. What do you feel? What do you want to play? Just don't think. Just play. You know, another thing you said, Ryan, reminded me of Carl Jung, the psychiatrist, who said um, our creative outputs are a reflection of our multiple personalities. So if you want to know more about me, listen to my music. If I want to know more about you, I'll listen to your music. If you don't have any music, I'd say, well, get going. Because we all have music. Humans all had music until about 500 years ago. And then we had this stupid idea that some people were musicians and others were not. We all have music. We're all hardwired to play music and write our own original music.
Interesting. I'll tell you a band that I just found out about yesterday that I'm listening to, and that's one of the things that, and I'm sure you might disagree with me here from an artist standpoint, Phil, but I love about Spotify is I can go and listen to stuff that I wouldn't normally, spend $20 on an album. I can go and sample.
Right.
But I was listening to a great YouTuber called the Professor of Rock. He has a great YouTube channel and he talks and interviews musicians. And he mentioned one of his favorite bands, and he said probably had one of the greatest debut albums is a band called the 1975. Never heard of them before in my life. And I started listening to them yesterday, and I kind of like it. It kind of surprised me that I didn't know about this band. So here's my last question, and then Don, you can finish up with maybe a question or a thought. With all this brain training and healthy brain talk, give me your opinion on AI, artificial intelligence. I seem to be using it more and more in my work, and in many cases, it does a really good job. But I find myself sometimes thinking maybe I should have thought about this and wrote it myself, than rather than just putting in ideas and having AI write it. What's your opinion on AI, Phil?
First of all, AI does not exist. That's
Okay.
one thing. Fact. Um, the confusion comes because there's so much hype around AI, which began with um, people starting AI companies and wanting funding, and
Mm-hmm.
that hype has gotten out into the public, and now everything is AI. There is no AI; it doesn't exist. What exists is better and better technology. I mean, we have better technology as the weeks. Every week, there's better technology. Um, just look at the microphones and the ear. I mean, these Sony earphones were $3,000 not that long ago. Um, and today, in all the big music centers in the world, they use earbuds. Most of them. Um, so the technology is improving, which means we can ask Siri how to get to a store that's 12 miles away that you're not sure what it is even called. And Siri will send you directions on a map, or she'll call for you. That's not AI, that's just simple search. We did search back in I think when I first got a computer, the National Library of Congress had a search function that was actually pretty good. It was new, but you can key in, brain health, body fat, whatever, and it would send you a list of the articles that have been published from the beginning. You can do that now, except you can do it in about 3 seconds, and you'll get 10,000 articles, and so that's what people think AI is. It's not. People think Google Maps is AI, or the GPS systems we have. That's just software. It's fancy software that is very helpful. Is it dumbing us down? Yes, absolutely. I went to go to look at a venue the other day that I'm going to be playing in, um, and it's really like 4 or 5 miles up the road, right on US 1. And I'm driving along, and I thought, well, I know where it is because I played there previous a year or so ago, a couple times, a few times. And I'm driving along, and I'm thinking, where is the place? So I asked Siri where it was, and she said, you have to make a U-turn. So I've never had a good sense of direction on the roads. I have a great sense of directions in the woods and on trails and off trail, but not on the road. So I use Google Maps almost exclusively if I have to go somewhere, even if it's like a mile away. Um, so in a sense, it's dumbed me down, but it hasn't dumbed me down to the point of losing anything that was of any importance. We uh, we're being dumbed down by social media probably more than anything, and they've measurably shown how the world has been dumbed down by social media, um, via a number of different metrics. Um,
Is
so
it
we
is it attention span? How long you're willing to think on something? Is that how
Part
we're
of
being
that
dumbed down?
is yes, part of that is the case, but that's a reflection of brain energy, which is like body energy, different but very similar. If we don't have enough brain energy, our attention span diminishes. our cognitive function diminishes. We can carry on a conversation and then it kind of fades off. Memory fades, all those things.
Just like endurance and building our cardiovascular system, our endurance system, we go out for a longer run. I mean, we stay with it for a while and we develop those mechanisms to allow us to do that. Do you think there's some damage to that information comes too quick and we're not exercising our brain to try to puzzle through the problem and figuring it out?
No, I think if the information comes too quick, then we need to be quicker so that we can obtain it. I mean, I kind of pride myself on being able to do a lot of different things at one time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm writing a paper on a certain topic, and I open a new tab and I read a journal article, and then I see a reference, and I open another tab, and here's the reference. Well, by the end of the day, I'm on 3 computers and I've got 26 tabs open, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm organizing just what I want. And the next morning I wake up and I say, yeah, that thing in tab 3 of computer 2 wasn't clear about, the biochemistry of ketones in the brain. I want to check that again. So if things come at us too quickly, it's more because our perception is that it's too quick and we can't keep up.
I have a feeling we've had
classically an
this
unhealthy
conversation
brain.
in the past, not us, but a generation before, saying the calculator is going to ruin humanity.
Yes.
These long division, you need to know how you got the number and work through the exercise to get there. But we can do so much more now that we can just put it in, push equal, and then move on with the big solution.
Yeah, and I like figuring out things in my head because I can do mathematic numbers. It's not that hard. There's a lot of creative shortcuts you can take. And if I have to, I just ask Siri. She knows. I mean, it's amazing. She's Australian, but she knows everything.
My Siri's Irish.
Oh, how nice.
Hey, Phil,
I'm part Irish.
When this article comes out, if it comes out before we publish this episode, we'd love to include the link. And even after it comes out, we can always add the link after. But it seems like a really good article that we can read, or at least have Siri read it for us.
It is a great article. It's really heavy, man, if I can use that.
Yeah.
There is a summary of it, and there should be a press release that is the dumbed down version that media people use. They don't write stories about studies anymore. They just cut and paste the press release, and that's what you read. That's how press releases are written. They're written for the media. But so there's all different kinds of things, but I touch on so many aspects of brain health directly and indirectly, and things like human error. I don't know if you read my article that came out a couple of weeks ago called I Think, Therefore I Err.
I missed that one. I'll have to go back and look.
It'll be in the show notes, Phil.
It'll be in the show notes, Scott,
Yes.
so you can.
Let me write that down. Hang on.
But the problem here with poor brain health is the levels of human error are increasing. And I had a statistic either in that article or it may be in the paper or both that said in the US, human error accounts for costs about $8 trillion a year. $8 trillion a year. My immediate thought was, who pays for that? We do. Okay. And by the way, Ryan, you didn't mention my music, but that's okay.
Well, we'll absolutely close the episode with with your music, like we do with all of your episodes, so people can
Oh, great. Thank you.
get a taste. As long as you don't charge us.
I have all my music on my music website available for free.
That's awesome. And it's Phil Maffetone Music, right?
It's Maffetone Music.
Maffetone Music. That link will be in the show notes, Phil.
Yes, you could find it there.
Yeah.
Dr. Phil Maffetone, we always enjoy your visits. It's such a great surprise to open up the door and have no idea what the conversation's going to be. And it always turns out after you exit that door, we look at one another and say, that was a good one. That was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Thanks,
And if
Don. I appreciate it. It's always fun to. One of the things that I restrict my life to now is things that are fun. And so
Smart.
I thought, well, okay, I'm only gonna do a few podcasts because I don't want to do the ones that are not fun. They're just boring. And so you guys are one of the fun ones. And so here we are having more fun.
Wow,
Oh,
we feel honored for you to say that about us, because we like.
And if you're listening to this, and you're not having fun, you could be brain injured.
And we need an intervention.
Yes, you'll get some emails on that one.
I'm just going to plug there. Phil has widely published a collection of great books on how to be healthier, how to be train better. We were just talking before we hit record. There's the two big books. Now, we erroneously call these books by the wrong title. We call the Big Red Book, and that's not the title. It's actually just called The Big Book of Health and Fitness, which is the red one. And then there's a yellow one, which we used to call, or we erroneously call, the Big Yellow Book, but it's not called that. It's called The Big Book of Endurance Training and Racing. Those should be on your shelf. They should be in your resource library if you haven't read those. They're really good. And then there's probably, how many books do you think you've published over the years, Phil? Is it 40, 50? Do you know?
I don't know. It's over 20.
Yeah, I would say easily over 20.
Including a textbook, and I've contributed to textbooks. I've written a novel called $1 Million Marathon. If you like novels, it's a story about running, but you don't have to be a runner to love it, because it has a lot of political intrigue and all kinds of. It was so weird to do this. I always wanted to write fiction, and again, when I became a songwriter, suddenly one day I could write fiction. So yes, that's one of the books. It's called, yes, I gave you the name.
Well, Phil, thank you so much. We appreciate it. You need to go out and make sure you have a healthy brain so that you can run
Mas.